This is APYouthNet.
Welcome to the APYouthNet, where we look at key issues regarding youth employment in Asia and the Pacific. I'm Matthew Koniak from the International Labour Organization. Today, I'm joined by the legendary Wall Street investor Jim Rogers. One thing that characterizes Jim Rogers is that he knows the world, literally, and not just the world of finance, but the world, full stop. He traveled the world twice, once on a motorcycle trip, secondly by car with his wife, and has earned a place in the Guinness Book of World Records for the distance traveled and also for the number of countries he has traveled to. Jim Rogers is also the author of many books, including The Investment Biker, which he wrote after his first motorcycle trip, as well as A Gift to My Children, A Father's Lesson for Life and Investing. He currently lives in Singapore, from where he joins us today. Mr. Rogers, thank you so much for joining the show.
I am delighted to be here, Matthew.
Thank you. I think I'd like to start the show by maybe going back, because this is a show about youth employment, young people, and I'd like to start with how it all started. You grew up in a very small town of Demopolis, Alabama, and of course you later became a successful investor whom we know. Now, my first question is, do you remember what your goals were as you were growing up, as you were a boy, as you were a young man? Did you have some goals, some ideas of where you wanted to be in life?
Well, it's a very good question. I did start working at a very early age, and somewhere along the line, probably certainly by the time I was in my 20s, if not before, I mainly wanted to be able to buy my freedom. I wanted to be able to do whatever I wanted to. I didn't want to have to be nice to people I didn't want to be nice to. But to do that, Matthew, in the world in which we live, I needed to have a little bit of money saved up. So I set out to earn money and save money so that I didn't want to buy cars or boats or airplanes or houses. I just wanted to be able to live any way I wanted to, whenever I wanted to.
Now, in the book, in The Gift to My Children, you mentioned about already a little bit how different you were from other boys. You would go to the baseball game, but because you would pick up the cans and make a little bit of money of that. And you also had a good advice from your Uncle Chink and from your dad. Apart from these examples, are there other things that you remember you'd like to share about how different perhaps you were compared or next to the boys you grew up with?
Well, I knew that I was much more interested in saving than the others seemed to be. The others seemed to be that if they got some money, they would spend it. If I got some money, I wanted to save it more than anything else. Certainly, I spent some things. I did buy some things, but I seemed to be more interested in saving for the future than the other people around me.
Now, maybe if I come back to the theme of youth employment, because usually when you go on television and the reporters usually ask you about whether to buy gold and invest in commodities or this currency or that currency. Now, I want to ask you about investment, but a different type of investment. I want to ask you about investing in young people, because we see so many reports out there that seem to demonstrate that it is wise to invest in young people, that it brings good return on investment, it brings political stability, it brings economic growth, and yet it seems to be difficult for governments to hear this message. Why do you think it is?
Well, mainly because governments get more support from older people, from grown-ups, than they do from young people. Young people don't vote, and if it's a democracy, if it's not a democracy, they still get more support from grown-ups than from young people. However, I am extremely optimistic about the future of young people. I had rather invest in education of young people than just about anything else, because that's the best way to grow a country or an economy or a society.
Now, like I said in the intro, you've traveled the world immensely. If you were leading a country, would you invest in young people yourself?
Oh, yes. No, education is extremely important from my point of view. I would require all young people to learn at least 2 languages, their native language and one other. I would make sure that all young people could read, write, and do simple, basic arithmetic. No, I would give every young person and every grown-up as a result the basic education that they need to be successful in the 21st century.
Now, I've gone to on YouTube and other channels, I've seen a few interviews you gave to the media, and in some of them, you mentioned that you live a simple life. that you don't own a car. Maybe your wife owns a car, but you don't. You've also said repeatedly you're a big fan of Asia. That's why you live in Asia. You've said that the 19th century was the century of the UK, and the 20th century was the US. Now we are in the 21st century, and that's Asia. Do you see anything that could derail that bright future that Asia has?
There's always something that could go wrong. I mean, we could all blow up the whole world with bombs or wars or something like that. But if that happens, it's going to affect everybody equally. And I think that Asia would come out of that even better than other people, because we do have a lot of hardworking, ambitious people here who save and invest for the future. So other than some massive war, I don't see anything that could derail it. We do have some problems in Asia with water. I mean, India has a terrible water problem. China has a terrible water problem, but people are spending a lot of money trying to solve those water problems. If we can solve the water problems, Asia's got a great future, and avoid war.
Now, you've also said repeatedly that you would encourage young people who don't know what to do not to go for MBAs necessarily, not to go for PR, and to really think deep about going into agriculture. According to you, how can rural development in Asia be more inclusive and more equitable?
We have a shortage of farmers developing in the world. We don't have many people going into agriculture. And so agriculture's got a great future. Yes, nothing happens overnight, Matthew. But if young people go into agriculture today, they're probably going to be much more successful and prosperous than if they go into finance, because agriculture has been terrible for 30 years. In my view, it's going to be great for the next 30 years. And the people who are in agriculture, while they may have to start off slower than people in finance, eventually they will catch up and pass the people in finance, and it will be the farmers who will have the great success, and the people who live in the agricultural areas who will have the better success.
Right. Now, another thing I wanted to touch on is you mentioned in the book and elsewhere that it's very important that young people learn to think for themselves, and they also study philosophy. Do you see that this is a major problem today? Do you think that young people are not given enough tools to learn to think for themselves?
Unfortunately, most young people, not just most young people, many people, it's a lot easier just to sit and watch television, and if somebody says to you the sky is blue, say, on television they said the sky is blue. Well, most people don't even want to go over and look out the window to see if the sky really is blue. It's very easy to accept what we're told. Governments throughout history have learned that, and that's why a lot of us just do as the government say, instead of thinking for ourselves and coming up with our own solutions. So if you can learn to think for yourself, to be curious and independent, you're going to be very successful.
I think you're right. It's important to think for oneself. It's important to do the homework and to do the right research, but at the same time, it's probably very important to receive the right advice, the right guidance. And for example, in this region, in terms of career guidance, orientation for what school, what career to choose, it's not easy. And many parents, in fact, they try to, if not push, at least orient their children to go for government jobs or for jobs with big companies, because of course this is where jobs are more steady and more decent. Do you have any word, either of advice or any reaction to that type of advice that comes recurrently?
Well, if that's what the children are good at, if they don't have much creativity or ambition, then sure. There are many people in the world who would be very happy working for the post office all their life because they don't have to worry about anything. But for people who have ambition and want to better their lives, that's usually not the way to do it. Going to work for the government or going to work for big corporations is not the way to have a very successful and dramatic life. I mean, look at the world. If you follow the crowd and you just take the easy way, you're probably not going to be as successful. You may have a nice life, but you're not going to be as successful as the people who go think for themselves and take an independent course.
Now, before we end, I also wanted to ask you about a question regarding gender, because I thought it was very interesting in your book. You talk about gender and you said that the trend that we're seeing now, whereas there is some imbalance, basically women have less chance to get the best jobs. Although parity has come to education, it's not the case for the world of work. You seem to say that this this trend is going to completely reverse in the near future because, and you cite, there are about 120 boys for every 100 girls in China and Korea, for example. But apart from the fact that it maybe, I can imagine it's going to be more difficult for boys or for young men to find their brides, how do you think that society will evolve that will make it actually, you know, more on par, the access to decent work between women and men?
Whenever you have a shortage of anything, the value goes higher because it's a shortage. So the world is developing, especially Asia, a huge shortage of females in Asia, and the value will go higher. 1,000 years ago, Matthew, in Europe, there weren't many girls. And so the status of girls went through the roof. Boys' families had to pay a dowry to get a wife in those days. Women ran companies, they ran city-states. Women were very, very highly thought of in society because there weren't enough of them. That's happening again in Asia, and the world is going to be the same way. The value of females is going to go higher and higher. If you have a wife or a girlfriend, you better be nice to her, because if you don't, somebody else will be. If you have female employees, you better be nice to them, because if you're not, they'll leave and go somewhere else because they now realize that their status is going higher and higher. Mao Zedong said women hold up half the sky. Well, he was wrong, because women, even in China under Mao Zedong, didn't have the great status. But now, women in Asia are going to, and the world, are going to have a much, much higher status in life in every aspect.
Well, that's a very positive note to end the show, I think, Jim. And so I think we'll end it there. I thank you so much. It's really been an honor, a pleasure to have you on the show, and wishing you all the best in Singapore. Thank you very much, Matthew. See you again. Thank you. And join us next time on the APYouthNet at www.apyouthnet.ilo.org for more on employment in Asia and the Pacific. From the International Labour Organization, I'm Matthew Koniak. Thanks and goodbye.
This has been an APYouthNet production.